staying with News at Prime tonight. While corruption costs South Africa's gross domestic product at least 27 billion rand annually, 76,000 jobs are also lost as a result. Corruption further threatens sustainable economic development, causes social instability, and endangers the rule of law. Well, let's try and assess the true cost of corruption in our society. Wits School of Governance Associate Professor William Gumede joins us tonight. Professor Gumede, thank you so much for your time. You've made an argument of corruption being a crime against humanity, saying that it is in fact that severe and should be viewed as nothing less. Why is it then that we seem to, at least in this country, be reaching a point where people are no longer shocked by corruption and it's almost come to be expected?
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. I think the very first thing is that people think corruption doesn't have any impact. If you can remember former President Jacob Zuma, when he was a president, he said that, well, you know, he didn't kill anybody, and so on. Now, that actually is most probably approach across many sectors of society, and it's a wrong approach because corruption does kill. You just think about it, I mean, let's just say a public hospital, a tender that was inflated and doesn't deliver to the hospital, and somebody goes to the hospital and dies because, you know, the equipment is not there. The person dies, and then it has its own impact. You know, that person could have been a breadwinner in a family. You know, the family becomes then destitute. There will be children, you know, in that family, and because the family is destitute, you know, mom may go, you know, they're all on hard times. Children may leave school, and you know, so you have to, you know, to calculate the costs along in that way. And I know you introduced by saying, you know, we're losing the GDP, we're losing something 27 billion rand or so. It's actually much more higher. Just as an example. You know, for a long period before COVID, there was an argument made that South Africa needs a 6% growth rate in order to deal, you know, with a high unemployment, poverty, and inequality. Now, if we had only cut something like 25% of our corruption, it would have brought us an extra 3% growth. Yeah, can you see how important it is? If we do nothing, say right now in the country, our government does nothing. We don't change any policy. We just cut the corruption by 25%. That essentially will bring us at least 3-4% of growth.
Of course, in the same breath, Professor Gumede, we see people, you know, and how outraged they do become over certain instances of corruption. We see people protest, even at a local level, around issues of corruption in their municipalities, which is leading to a lack of services. Are there particular indicators, and particularly from you as an academic, that you would be looking for within our society that would signal that, in fact, we've turned the tide in terms of the endemic culture of corruption and how we as South Africans are responding to it?
Yes, no, I am actually positive that we're beginning to turn the tide. Now, to deal with corruption, if we look at how other countries have dealt with systemic corruption, because we are now, unfortunately, corruption is almost like now become the DNA of us as South Africans. It's across society, it's not only in government, it's in the private sector, but it is also even in places like churches, in schools, universities, you know, it's cut across. You know, areas where we would have thought, you know, there would be no corruption, but we got corruption there. So, you know, the very first thing that countries that effectively dealt with corruption did is that they prosecuted the culprits who are at a very high political level. Let's just take a country like South Korea. I mean, you know, their former president was sent to jail. So that really is where you start to turn the tide. It is very important because what it does is sends a signal then, you know, across society that even if the president or the former president can be prosecuted for corruption, anyone below the value chain can be expected to be prosecutors. That immediately turns around society. And then the second thing what these societies have done is they hold people accountable. So when you found out that you've been corrupt, you'll be charged and you'll be jailed and you'll have long jail sentences. And often in these societies, what they started to do is to shame people who are corrupt, particularly who are, abusing and misusing public money. So because public money is really, because it's there's a taxpayer's money, there's a money that's supposed to provide education, services for the police, and so on. So I think we are starting to see it by the fact that the prosecution of our former President Jacob Zuma, and now also, the prosecution of Ace Magashule as the General Secretary of the ANC, these are powerful figures. Now, if they can be prosecuted, I think it will send a signal for everyone there below their chain, that they are also likely to be prosecuted. That is almost the only thing that will end the culture of impunity.
Of course, the difficulty is that if we were to use just your barometer and look at senior leaders within government today, or even within the public, the political party, the ANC, who could face different types of prosecutions, there will then be the argument about what seems to be selective prosecution, where you have a plethora of different allegations being brought against people by way of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. And yet to date, what we have seen coming out of the Commission in terms of prosecutions by the National Prosecuting Authority has been quite limited.
Yes, no, it is quite limited, but you must understand, we cannot, to deal with corruption is to actually to be selective, to choose if there's, because so much corruption across, in government and in the ANC and in business. The prosecuting authorities need to target, the most high profile, the most powerful, the untouchables in order to turn the tide. It's almost like, in New York in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s was very, very corrupt. And it turned around. I mean, the city that now is totally different than it was in the 1970s and 1980s. So what they had to do then, the Attorney General then, who later became the mayor of New York, is to target those who stand out, who are so powerful in society, to target them. Yes, it is targeted, and yes, they will complain, of course, that it's targeted, but that is the only approach. You go that way, and that really will then send a signal across society that no one is untouchable and no one can get away. One has to get at the head. That is how one changes society. One can't change it from the bottom. We cannot, at the beginning, prosecute everyone. We just don't have the capacity. So what do? We select the most powerful people who are corrupt, and we send a powerful message to society that corruption won't be tolerated by starting at the top.
William Gumede from the Wits School of Governance, let me thank you so much for your time on News at Prime, sharing his views there. Well.